Well, this particular incident occurred on the Mars Exploration Rover project, and this occurred while we were testing the dynamic test module, which is the DTM rover. This is the test rover, not the actual flight rover. But part of the process of testing includes mechanical deployments. On the rover, as with any spacecraft, we have multiple mechanical deployments, and typically those deployments are preceded by some type of pyrotechnic device, release mechanism, bolt cutter, pin puller, etc. We found that these are the most reliable types of mechanisms that we can use, and throughout the years we continue to use them because they're extremely reliable. But part of that reliability includes checking to make sure that once you've deployed these devices, that the actual device itself gets deployed. In addition to that, because they are ordnance devices, pyrotechnic devices, we also want to check to make sure that the shock loading that these devices impose does not adversely affect any co-located piece of equipment. So this particular test, we were testing the deployment of the high gain antenna on the rover deck. Again, this was an engineering model, it was not actual flight hardware. And the device that we were actually testing was a pin pulling device. Now, what happens with these devices is they're so expensive, each one of these devices, that you don't normally like to use an actual flight unit when you test. You try to do a refurbished unit, and that was the case with this particular pin puller. It was a refurbished pin puller. And the refurbishment of a pyro device is something we've done for many, many years in a lab without any incident that I recall other than this particular one. Well, this particular incident occurred at a point in time when we were not imposing any really strict procedures on proximate location of people during the test. So we had a table set up with the pyrotechnicians, fairly close proximity to the deck where this pin puller device was located. Now, what occurred is when this pin puller was initiated, the threaded end cap actually was ejected in the opposite direction of the pin puller, and the ejected mass ricocheted off an element on the deck and came back and very closely to the technician sitting at the table impacted the wall behind them and created a nice little dent in the wall. And again, this was one of those memorable types of experiences that you take with you and you make sure gets carried over to other projects. As a result of this, the JPL process for any ordnance testing was immediately changed to the end that any ordnance testing is now done remotely, meaning that we have personnel located behind some sort of barrier when you actually initiate the device. Coupled with that is we also now make sure that when you're doing an ordnance type test that you don't have any co-located critical hardware that could impact it. So one of the things we do in the System Safety Office is to make sure that anytime we have ordnance devices being tested, we certainly bring along the occupational safety folks that are in charge of ordnance devices, and we make sure that our technicians are fully trained. We make sure that anybody in close proximity has had some sort of ordnance training, and we also make sure that there's correct configuration for the test and correct barriers are placed. So this has affected our process to the end that, like I said, we do not do any close proximate ordnance testing. People have to be out of the room. And we like to carry this over to any testing we do, even at our partners' facilities or the vendors' facilities. So part of my job is to make sure that if we are going to be testing using JPL personnel anywhere at JPL or non-JPL facilities, that correct procedures get implemented. So this was extremely, I would say from a risk standpoint, it had a high risk to the project, certainly from a personnel safety standpoint. It can carry over into high risk to project elements in that you could have an impact. And what we also implemented was a very thorough QA process now, an inspection process on any device that gets reconstituted, reconfigured, refurbished. We still do refurbishment on pyro devices, but it's done to a much more stringent process with QA oversight. So that's probably the main things that were implemented. Of course, again, this is one of those incidents that helps me in terms of relaying the lessons learned to projects and relaying the necessity for extreme oversight when you're dealing with ordnance devices to the technicians. And it acts as quite a lever sometimes to, if you tell this story to somebody, they don't have any problems with you telling them they have to get out of the room.